legit.
MMA Buzz.
Hello and welcome to MMA Buzz, the East Coast MMA chat, where three friends get together for some beers and talk about MMA, upcoming cards, and industry news. We are coming to you pre-recorded from our Fredericton, New Brunswick studio. I am your host, Rodney Man. That's Rodney Man on Instagram.
I am Nick Browne, NHBrown44 on Instagram and Twitter.
Now, typically rounding out the trio, we have Trevor Greber Lutz. That's Greber on Instagram. But today, he is unable to attend, so we are going ahead without him because we wanted to cover what was one of the most stacked fight nights in UFC history. Dillashaw versus Cruz. That's UFC Fight Night 81. That went down in Boston. I was lucky enough to kick it down to Boston with our good friend JC to watch the fights live. And I gotta say, it was amazing. The fights did not disappoint. It was my first UFC, so maybe I'm a little bit biased. But I have to say, it was enjoyable all around. The crowd was great. The fights are great. The atmosphere was pretty amazing. I've been to some live sports before, some live professional sports, and I have to say it was unlike anything I had ever been to. But before we get into it, as usual, we're going to tell you what we are drinking. Today, we just got done drinking a Two Roads Lil Heaven Session IPA, which I brought back from my trip to Boston. Picked it up at the Quincy Market in Boston. And this beer here is from Connecticut. It's a very tasty, light beer. On the can it says a crushable India Pale Ale, and I would have to agree. I would be afraid to come in contact with this on a warm summer day. Perhaps a six-pack would go down rather quick. But what I am drinking during the show is a little more local for us. Coming to you from Fredericton, New Brunswick, I've got a Feels Good Imperial Pilsner. Coming from Picaroons, and it's a 7%, and it's pretty delicious. It's in support of Feels Good, an art and music community, and they do a lot around Fredericton and New Brunswick and surrounding area as far as supporting the arts and taking advantage of some of their funding before and gone to a lot of their events, and it's always been a good time. Nick, what are you drinking?
I am drinking a Three Fields Harvest Wet Hop Strong Ale from Garrison Brewing Company. They're out of Halifax, Nova Scotia. This is a 6.3% alcohol by volume beer, made with 100% Nova Scotia hops, and it has to be one of the smoothest beers I've ever had.
I would agree. I had a little sip, and I was waiting to feel the bite, but the bite never came. It was really, really good. I think it looks like it's a short-term beer, so if you're listening to this in the area, check it out. It's new to me. Maybe it's more prevalent in Nova Scotia.
Brewed once a year.
Brewed once a year. There you have it, folks. Get it while it's hot, or drink it while it's cold. You don't want it this.
Three Fields Harvest. Delicious.
Check it out. All right, so yeah, let's get into the action. Like I said, I was there. First UFC. In fact, first time watching a fight in English that I did not have commentators for. I've muted fights that were happening in Russia or Japan because I'm not going to understand the commentary anyways. But when you're there, I have to say the atmosphere was very strange. And I know we were chatting over text message, so we were enjoying it in two separate mediums. You guys were watching it live on TV, and of course I was watching it in person. JC and I rolled into the stadium. The wait was very short. We were in within 20 minutes. We had pretty decent seats. Check us out on MMA Buzz Radio on Twitter if you want to see a picture. Twitter and Facebook. We were high up, and it was quite surreal to watch people fighting very tiny in the cage while watching the screen with the live TV angles just above it. But I think it helped because when people were in the clinch or wrestling, it was kind of tough to decipher the finer movements, but all you had to do was look up at the screen to see, wrist control and such. But it was really impressive to see someone get clocked in the face and fly back like 2 meters right in front of you as well. If you're listening to this, chances are you've checked out the event, and in our main event, we had TJ Dillashaw defending his title for the third time against former champion Dominic Cruz, stripped of his title in 2014 after being on the disabled list for quite some time after numerous ACL injuries. We saw a really competitive fight, went to a split decision, second time in a row title fight's gone to a split decision here in UFC. Only this time it did not go in favor of the champion. We saw Cruz edge out Dillashaw. I mean, looking at the stats, it was a very tight fight, so I can see why the split decision came, although there was quite a discrepancy in the cards. So one judge giving it 49-46, which I don't know if I agree with entirely, but the other one's a little tighter in the mix. The fight started off pretty great with the walkout music, and like I say, first time going to the UFC, it is a totally different experience when someone's walking out live. The music is so much bassier. We had Dillashaw coming out to Red Hot Chili Peppers, Can't Stop. A little bit of inspiration there, even though he didn't get stopped, so he was kind of telling the truth. And we had Cruz coming out to Cypress Hill, Kill a Man, mixed into Nate Dogg. So I had my bets on Cruz before, but that just solidified the deal. Although I love Red Hot Chili Peppers, don't get me wrong. Dillashaw showed some fast movement. Cruz had lots of head movement, showing Dillashaw lots of angles. The stats I'll just mention before we get to talking about the fight overall and impressions. We had Dillashaw landing 30% of his strikes, 130 out of 430 strikes, 109 of those being significant strikes, scoring one takedown on Cruz. Cruz landing 39% of his strikes. That's 122 out of 312 strikes, 112 of those being significant strikes, and he scored 4 takedowns on Dillashaw, which is actually quite impressive given that Dillashaw had never been taken down before in his professional career. So, in professional MMA career. Watching this on TV obviously would have been a whole lot more frantic and crazy than watching it in person. So, Nick, why don't you give me your insight on that fight?
Watching the fight live, I guess maybe I don't pay enough attention to takedowns because I don't feel like they should be worth as many points as they are. I thought that Dillashaw had won the fight. I was surprised by the decision. Although I was happy with the decision because I also wanted Cruz to win. It was a great fight. It was entertaining the whole way through, I thought. So, great main event to cap off the card.
Yeah. The whole fight to me looked like it was Cruz's the whole way until the 5th round. I really didn't even notice Dillashaw coming back in the 4th, but I can see, if you rewatch it, him taking the 4th and the 5th. Cruz later said that he hurt his foot in the 5th. He's got fascial tendonitis or something like this. Apparently runners get it all the time, and it shouldn't be another one of those, 3-year hiatuses for him. Hopefully. But
he doesn't need that.
Cruz and Dillashaw really looked like mirror images of each other in the cage, to me anyways. Cruz having more head movement while Dillashaw did a lot more light-footed back and forth. I think Cruz might have won the fight before the fight even happened. Shit-talking and getting into TJ's head like on the previous event where they actually showed them going back and forth, a war of words. Dillashaw leaving Team Alpha Male and all of that drama with Uriah Faber and everybody else there. I think even though it was tight, I don't know how I feel about an immediate rematch. I think everybody's kind of tired of hearing those words after a fight. It kind of says, the judges didn't get it right, or they didn't really score what they wanted to. They were too tentative, and, give them 5 more rounds. I don't know if I see it that way, even though that's too bad for TJ. He had 3 fights defending his title, but I think now it's time for Cruz to come back and really solidify his career.
Yeah, I don't either. I mean, TJ was defending his title, but before he got injured, that was Cruz's title as well. So,
true.
I mean, really, that was kind of the match to solidify the champion, even though TJ had a few title defenses.
Yeah, that's true. I guess it was almost like an asterisk beside his title
the
entire time. Looking down the rankings within bantamweight, it's kind of tough to see who really deserves the next title shot. I mean, Uriah could have the rematch with Cruz. Cruz could look for his redemption, and even if he wins, the rubber match, best of 3, could happen. But, Aljamain Sterling Aljamain Sterling, a wrestler, is sort of waiting just outside of the top three, and he's currently in negotiations to renew his contract. But if he could get it, I could see that happening. Cruz, I believe, would look good against a wrestler, given TJ Dillashaw is a reinvented wrestler. But he took TJ down 4 times, and you're saying that maybe the TDs are too highly scored, and really, I don't remember Cruz really taking too much advantage of the time on top. It was really quick, but just the fact that it happened, it's one of those things it is a differentiator. That takes a few seconds out of that person's attack. They have to expend energy to get up.
It does. I just feel it shouldn't be worth as much as it is unless you do something with it.
Yeah. Well, speaking of wrestling and takedowns, why don't we transition over to the co-main event, Anthony Pettis versus Eddie Alvarez, where we saw another split decision go the way of Eddie Alvarez, who improves to 27-4, essentially exploiting Pettis' wrestling pretty badly, taking a page right out of Rafael Dos Anjos' playbook, who basically wrote the playbook on defeating Pettis in his win over Pettis to take the championship from him. Pettis, looked good on the feet while he had the opportunity to, but every single time he was taken down pretty quickly. I feel like Pettis really needs to fill in that wrestling gap in his game, or else he's gonna fall off the face of contenders here pretty quick.
Yeah, he's got some work to do before he has another fight for sure.
Yeah, and I was sitting with at the TD Garden. I was sitting with some wrestlers, and we were watching the screen, seeing the pretty high level grappling going on from Alvarez, and they were really talking me through some of the steps. And I'm not a wrestler. I do enjoy the wrestling and grappling aspect of UFC. I'm more of a stand-up practitioner, I suppose, in boxing, but the high-level grappling going on by Alvarez was pretty impressive to negate Pettis' attempts to get up. You can tell Pettis had made some strides, but it just didn't really, come to fruition for him in that fight to get back up to his feet and really highlight, a highlight reel knockout on Alvarez, which was entirely a possibility, but Alvarez really didn't give him the chance.
No, he didn't give him a chance at all. At the same time, I just wasn't impressed overall with this fight.
Well, yeah, that's just it, because, sure, Alvarez wins, but he doesn't really impress with the lay and pray style that he utilized to win. And poor Pettis, man, talk about going from hero to zero, being on the box of Wheaties, 2 straight wrestling losses, He really needs some strategic matchmaking to return to the public's consciousness. Meanwhile, I think Alvarez, despite going against a, murderer's row, Cerrone, Melendez, and Pettis after coming up from Bellator, really doesn't even crack the public consciousness at all, despite beating Pettis, who, still has a name.
Nah, if you want to fight the champ, you got to look like a champ.
That is true, yeah. I don't think
nobody wants to see a boring champ.
No, I really do think that
we've seen it before, but
Pettis really needs to fill in those blanks, because if he can, I think he can be really well rounded. And he is still young, and he's got an 18-4 record. That's 22 fights under his belt. And for a guy that young to have that much experience, I think now's the time where you see sort of a Frank Mir approach, where he goes back to the drawing board, reestablishes himself, and goes from there.
Take some time, work on his goals, or work on his gaps. Sorry.
Life goals, fill in the gaps.
Yeah.
We didn't actually cheers to start the podcast, so here we go.
Oh,
Episode
right.
5. Yep. We're on the Coco main event right now, but I guess that's what happens when you have a beer before the show. You may notice my voice is a little bit hoarse and nasally. I got a little bit sick while I was in Boston, and I'm still reeling. We would have come to you last night, but I couldn't talk, so this is 24 hours later, and I feel great being where I'm at. Can't complain. So yeah, let's talk about Travis Browne and Matt Mitrione, man. Now, talk about a fight laced with controversy. We had Travis Browne, first and foremost, coming out to a sea of boos. He was not liked at all. That guy has got to be the most hated fighter in UFC right now, even next to Ronda Rousey. Travis Browne did look good. I'll give him that. He was light on his feet. He had good movement. But every single time Matt Mitrione moved in, he had his fingers up, and you saw in the first round the eye poke on Matt Mitrione from Travis Browne left Matt Mitrione sort of up against the cage, like he was really taken back from that one. That one was bad enough, but that wasn't even the worst one. On another attack later on, he moves in, eye poke comes up, and the ref, I feel the ref should have maybe stepped in on the first one to warn Travis Browne, because it was pretty obvious to us on the replays, but he didn't. The second eye poke comes in, and he doesn't even stop the fight for the eye poke at all. Like, not even to give Matt Mitrione a chance to come back in the fight. And of course, Travis Browne swarms and takes advantage and gets the TKO victory.
Easy to knock out a blind man, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I watched an interview with Matt Mitrione with Ariel Helwani after the fact, and he was saying, the ref puts up 2 fingers in front of your eyes and says, how many fingers can I see? And I mean, obviously, I'm looking at your hand. I'm not an idiot. I see you've got 2 fingers up. I'm going to say 2. And maybe I see 4, but I just divide that. Apparently, he was requesting 5 minutes, but he didn't get it. It's a very interesting fight. We have, on one hand, a new-to-me referee that clearly was sort of either nervous or, gun-shy about taking a point away. But, I mean, where do you sit on all this? Eye poke, Travis Browne victory, poor Matt Mitrione, last fight of his contract, goes out on a loss. Controversial, albeit, but still a loss.
No pretty controversial loss. I don't know, that was just bad reffing, and he was a new ref to me, too. I've never seen him before. Who knows? But, I mean, you say maybe nervous, but, I mean, geez, you can't really go in as a ref nervous. You got to go in and just do your job.
Yeah, I'm just saying, maybe the nerves were there because maybe it was his first UFC event. Yeah. We watch a lot of UFC, so maybe it flew under our radar, but...
It could be, it might not be, I don't know. You would think he would have done some sort of high-level reffing before he was reffing UFC.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we see it even with some of the seasoned vet referees.
Everyone has a bad day, but...
Yeah, that was just a really bad day. Matt Mitrione, of course...
You making a bad decision can mean a fighter's career, so...
Yeah, and really that swarm that Travis Browne did on Matt Mitrione when he knocked him to the ground, Matt Mitrione also separated his shoulder. I don't know if you noticed in the replay, you can see his shoulder bone poking up in... Like, his skin is literally deformed on his shoulder.
No, I didn't notice that.
Yeah, it was pretty gnarly. So, he wakes up the next morning, or he goes to the hospital with a broken orbital bone and a dislocated shoulder. All because a ref didn't step in to give him 5 minutes to clear his vision. And, 38 years old, negotiating a new contract. It's an interesting spot for Matt Mitrione, and it hurts for me to say that because I'm a fan. I mean, I joined in the chorus of boos against Browne. Sorry if you're listening to this, but I also think Browne comes out of this looking good, despite the eye pokes. It's another victory for him. So, well, I guess he did just lose to Arlovsky. So
he did, but I mean, he came back from it. Win's a win, I guess.
Yeah. Speaking of wins a win, good old Patrick Cote, another win, TKO over Saunders. I guess I should have asked, anything else you want to talk about on that fight?
No, I think I'm good.
All right, well, moving down the rest of the card, we had Patrick Cote, TKO over Ben Saunders. Cote, 3rd win in a row. Kind of one of those guys, been in the UFC since UFC 50, but never really considered a contender. Still not sure he is, but I hope this propels him up. Good old Canadian boy. I'm hoping he can really make a run or at least get some more impressive knockouts.
Yeah, there's not too many Canadians. We got to cheer for them when we can.
Yeah, exactly. But I tell you what there was. Local boys to Boston, and some local people showed up. I'm thinking Rob Font got a hero's welcome despite fighting a fellow Bostonian fighter. The other guy barely got a cheer. Meanwhile, Rob Font's just like blowing the roof off the stadium. He gets a TKO. After that fight, we're looking at I thought it was quite interesting. 3 rear naked chokes in a row. Started off by Paul Felder, who defeated Darren Cruikshank. Followed up by Luke Sanders, rear naked choke, former RFA champ, and Chris Wade with a really sneaky, really smart first round rear naked choke victory. I had a feeling it was going to go his way, but just the way that it went so sly, it was so impressive. Anything else on this card jump out at you before we move on to our sections?
Yeah, Lear Latifi's knockout of Sean O'Connell was pretty impressive. 30 seconds, and I don't know if he swung before that or not. I think it might have been the first punch he threw.
Lear Latifi looked fucking cut. Like,
he did.
Came a long way from his short notice fight that he had in his... Was it his debut? No, his last fight, though. He stepped up with 2 weeks' notice.
He looked great.
It was... I felt bad. Obviously, Sean O'Connell's watching tape on this guy thinking, all right, we got ourselves a Roy Nelson, and then all of a sudden he shows up, he's like cut like a mountainside. It was pretty impressive. So yeah, I mean, I've got that I already mentioned everything that stood out for me. But aside from everything that stood out there, just being there, that experience. If you haven't been to a UFC yet, you need to go. We kind of decided last minute, so it was only our friend JC and I. Unfortunately, the rest of the MMA Buzz crew couldn't come, but maybe next time they're in Canada.
Should have had a passport.
Yeah, hey, that's just it. We gotta get that. We gotta get ourselves credentialed and ready to go. So yeah, let's move on to our first section. Half cut, uppercut. Who was the dark horse of the night for you?
I had Cool Hand Luke Saunders.
Yep.
Love that nickname. Defeating Maximo Blanco by rear naked choke in the first round. Looked like he was going to get taken out early. He was getting choked. He managed to turn it around. And he took the fight on short notice, too. So that was impressive. That was my half cut uppercut of the night.
My half cut uppercut is also Cool Hand Luke Sanders. Cool Hand, uncool tattoo. Like the guy's name going around his torso and up around his arm. I like actually the artistic integrity of the tattoo. It looks pretty nice. Like the lines are very crisp, and I think it shows up nicely on TV. But who gets that? Anyways. Champion in our
would say, creative fighter.
Creative fighter, yeah. Yeesh. Yeah, he was an impressive fighter, though. I'll give him that. His hair's all over the place. Former champion in RFA. Obviously, moving on to UFC, he's got to leave that belt behind. Just another example of how, not all the best fighters are in the UFC. I think we've got a lot to see in the future in Luke Sanders. Let's move on to our second segment. The full bladder splatter. Who pissed the bed hardest this event? UFC Fight Night 81. Nick, who do you have?
Alright, I've got Darren Cruikshank pissing the bed. Ooh. I thought he was winning the fight. I think everyone else thought he was winning the fight. And then he got submitted in the third round, so Darren Cruikshank pissed the bed.
He looked good while he was on his way to pissing the bed.
Oh, he did. He looked great.
That's the thing with Darren Cruikshank, man. He's like so impressive with his style, and he's really good at keeping that range. Kicks are impressive as fuck, but he just sometimes loses just the edge for a split second, and people can take advantage of that.
That's all it takes.
Yeah, it's really a testament to the people who he's fighting. My full bladder splatter has to go to Sean O'Connell. This guy riding a lot of steam coming into this fight. Doesn't even really get a punch in and eats it. I mean, that can happen in any light heavyweight fight, or pretty much any division. But it happened to him, and he looked like a punk getting it done to him. So,
I thought he was going to win that fight.
I did too. I had him winning too. Well, but obviously UFC Europe did not.
No, UFC Europe definitely did not.
Yeah.
Right on Instagram saying, Latifi's going to win. I guess they had that one right.
Yeah, they're rooting for the home country boy. All right, well, before I start coughing again, we're going to just look forward at what we got coming up next in the world of MMA. First and foremost, we've got UFC on Fox 18. Got a lot to look forward in that fight. On that card. Johnson versus Bader. You got Ben Rothwell versus Josh Barnett. Got the return to Sage Northcutt against undefeated Andrew Hallbrook. We got Tarek Safadine and Jake Ellenberger. Tell me how excited you are for that Johnson-Bader fight.
Well, I mean, Anthony Johnson's probably my favorite fighter right now, so I'm pretty pumped for that. I think Bader's a good matchup for him. I, of course, want to see Johnson make his way back up to a title shot, so we'll see how it goes.
Yeah, I mean, I would love to see Johnson back in the title picture again as well. But, looking back at our picks for most improved for the year last year, Ryan Bader, really coming up on that end. Looking like a, champ in the making if he can round out his game.
And honestly, no matter what happens, well, I mean, not what happens with Johnson's fight, but I really want to see him have the fight he was supposed to have.
Yeah, that is true. Well, I have a feeling it's going to be a slobber knocker, to borrow from JR from wrestling.
Yeah.
In other cards, we've got Bellator coming up. It's Paul Daly, Andy Urick. Paul Daly, obviously a crazy knockout artist. If Trevor was here, he would be singing his praise. One of his favorite fighters. We've got up-and-coming Chris Honeycutt fighting Paul Bradley. A veteran, 22-6. Patrick Fier fighting Ryan Couture. That's going to be a barn burner. That one I'm really looking forward to. I will be tuning in for Bellator 148, Daly versus Urick. Also, in the mix, we've got World Series of Fighting 27. It's Teddy Holder versus Shamil Ganzadov. Looking down the card, there's nothing jumping out at me aside from Justin Harley's sort of up-and-coming guy. But if we've learned anything from watching the regional reviews on Access TV and watching all those local cards down in the States, it's going to be, there's no shortage of up-and-coming fighters on these, quote-unquote lower-tier fighting leagues. Not saying that one of these leagues might not really pull ahead in 2016. I'm really hoping that does happen. But I'm thinking this Bellator card is going to trump the WSOF card. But we'll wait and see. Sometimes those legacy cards are crazy. Oh yeah, you know what we didn't talk about? Invicta 15. Yes, that's true. I know you guys tuned into that. I was driving, so what were you left with?
I actually forgot that Invicta was on Saturday night. We watched a few of the fights before UFC started on Sunday.
Oh yeah? So what did you catch?
Main event, Cyborg versus Ibrahimova.
Yeah, how was it?
Of course, it was great. KO with 2 seconds left in the first round for Cyborg.
Woo! That's an impressive victory.
Yep.
I heard it happened in an airport hangar.
It was in a hangar. We're coming to you live from a packed hangar.
That's crazy. Yeah, I did hear the attendance was really good. That sort of reminds me of UFC Fighting for the Troops on UFC Fight Night not long ago when they had that Yoel Romero Kennedy fight and Yoel Romero sat on the stool for too long. But yeah, that Invicta card, I'll have to tune in for that Cyborg fight. Speaking of Cyborg, we're kind of getting on a tangent here, but do you think that, Ronda losing affects Cyborg? You think we'll see Cyborg in UFC now? I mean, she said she's open to a catch weight with Holly Holm, but as if Holly Holm's going to fight Cyborg right now. She's got Miesha Tate and, a whole bunch of other people behind her, Ronda Rousey included.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if Cyborg will come to UFC or not. I mean, she's got a good thing going where she is.
Yeah, big fish, little pond kind of thing.
Yeah. And, they got those banners behind them in Invicta.
That's true, man. Think about the money she'll lose.
I just have to mention as well, Angela Hill.
Oh yeah, she
coming off 2 losses in UFC.
She got cut in the UFC and she was fighting.
She got cut.
Yeah.
She fought Alita Gray, KO by knee to the body in the first round. It was brutal. She came back with a vengeance after getting cut by UFC.
Shit, I'll have to check that fight out on Fight Pass. That's Fight Pass. They're not paying us to say it, but you need to get it because if you are an MMA fan, you are going to love it. I suppose, the one thing I bought at UFC when I was there, Pride shirt.
Yeah.
JC got a few UFC hoodies. But I gotta say, man, you can hate on the Reebok gear, but as soon as you got it in your hand, the material is, unrivaled. It is really soft, yeah. Yeah, really, really nice stuff.
So you won't look good, but you're comfortable.
Well, I gotta say, the hoodie looks good on JC. It's like a slender cut, it's like a tight fit. And it's, he got that for him and his girlfriend, Chantel. Shout out to Chantel. She comes by for UFC all the time. She's a hoot. They're both a hoot. Also, worth shaming, if you're already listening this far, chances are you are a friend. If not, hey, maybe you are now. You should check out MMA Buzz Radio on Twitter. I'm going to post a video of our good friend JC who fell asleep during the event. It is hilarious.
I haven't seen this video. I just saw a picture.
Oh, really? Oh, my God. I've got a video of him sleeping during Eye of the Tiger. He dun, 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 and he's just literally passed out. Too many Blue Moons, man. Too many Belgian beers. Yeah, one thing New England's good for. Delicious beers. Anywho, let's wrap this bitch up. That's MMA Buzz, episode 5. We want to hear from you. Let us know how we're doing. You can find us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. It's MMA Buzz Radio, and that's Rodney Man and NH Browne
44
on Instagram.
And don't forget Grevor as well. Grevor on Instagram.
Grevor on Instagram. Grevor. Like his photos. But seriously, thank you for tuning in. We appreciate all the love you guys give. We're seeing our numbers go up. We got fan interaction. We are loving it. Hope you guys are loving it too. Cheers.
All right, keep checking it out, guys. Thanks.
MMA Buzz. Brought to you by The Beach Radio.